it's a great honor to have you at Google. You are the person I'm most excited about hosting in many years.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're very grateful to you for the generosity of your time and your presence.
Thank you.
So the topic of today, I know at his level, people assign him topics, so he's come here not really knowing what to talk about.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes, yes. The topic is inner connection and meditation,
Yes.
changing the world from the inside out.
Wow.
Yeah, cool, huh? Yeah. So before we talk about that, meditation and changing the world, I want to ask you a few simple questions about yourself.
Okay.
So the audience will know you a little bit more.
Okay.
So the first question, it sounds like a kid's question.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's a good one, which is, how is it like to be the Karmapa?
Okay.
What's the best thing and the worst thing about being a Karmapa?
Best thing. Okay. Better to use.
Okay.
Yeah. Translate. 다 당고대 대 용어대 가수로다. 당고대 상호를 위한 첨지슈아잉.
That's So first of all, I'd like to just say hello and welcome to everyone.
디 까마바 차베 차 서머로 다디 문제 제베 걸리야 로드유제. 디두스단에 지당 아주 패밀리 상호로다 까마벌 대바차당 즉 가르는 디 가주로다 자침지야디 아주 패밀리 상호도 체리요래. 다 이미네양 다 나란디 까마바 인사버드게 아주 패밀리 상호로 이렇게 여만디 expectation. 안데 인두산에 루브르도다 까마바 차래. 인두산 급디두산에 까마바 차위면 디스지게 가트레. 지 기브로 위기를 삼으로 제무자 망부터고를 삼으로 안다는 신 디데 삼으로지 코뇨스.
That's so. When I was recognized as the Karmapa, I was 7 years old. And generally, at that time, before I was recognized, my family had already a very strong custom of having great faith toward the master who was known as Karmapa, considering that master to be a very important, precious master. So we all felt that way about this individual who is known as Karmapa, but none of us had the expectation that I was going to become that individual. So I became the Karmapa in a very sudden manner, and at first I thought it was just going to be a great fun time to become the Karmapa. I would have many opportunities to play and many things to play with and so forth. That was my first impression.
태인비네 가수르다. 까마바 차사의 제리아트 드리지 가수르다. 기부동하사 게메메소치. 제가 공부들 좋아들량에 렌슈아데 가라서나 다 가수 if not 가수 저지 매비나 샘 저지 매비나 안데 갈라 커버지레 성정도스
Lasso?
샘 저지 예빈 디즈레 라르지멘도 성도스 이미네야 강에데 가라상아 저지 마중 권에 저랑 까마버스 라빈사 다티 강에르 주와
Lasso.
디 ngel kama baja tini shine so sem thadi chen
Lasso.
an du mang go yares
Lasso.
in du sane di junse de ne ta nge kharla urta difficult sana big challenge sabaka susu mizina benaji susu phama da chungdu ni phama da kha chegwa da mang go jilo dong chegwa chi imi in du sane ta di le la ba mara study not fun la chan te du da
Lasso? Mm-hmm. But it didn't turn out that way. And what I would say is that if I had time to prepare to become the Karmapa, then it would have been fairly easy and approachable. But without any time to prepare, it is very difficult. And the way that it happened for me is that I didn't have any time to prepare. Everything happened very suddenly. And there were a lot of adjustments to make that I wasn't prepared for. Parting from my parents for long periods of time, and there were many other things that I had to give up. So in the end, I found out that it's not fun, quite difficult.
yes.
So what's the best thing about being Karmapa?
What's the best thing?
Yeah.
Best thing? Best thing? Tadi kama chabi mine ji susui kashwe self kashwa daji responsibility di assembly susui ki ngoshiati 고급 체험 정도 정도 있어서 미망부지 유인에 소소를 고급지 가려야지 지난데 고급 등에서 말 민상로리아 디기 the responsibility the RS 이미네 미망부지리아 고급 되게 용거 말았어 고급 되면 인자 고졸리아 소소 데다 가르쳐다지 수수 미진나로리아 미 수수 지뷰 된다 말이야 봐 에리 미망부지당 다나 신기 지 가르쳐 전부링이 지난 뉴주의 제바 디체도 지수수 미지디 나로를 창디 차상 추여버디 민망부지 하고요 인도자 대추에 대하고야 그거를 지니ებ디 예선블리아다 가면 버차버디 the good things
Awesome. I think one really good thing about being in the Karmapa is the opportunity that has afforded me to recognize my own responsibilities. I think that obviously I believe everyone has great responsibilities to everyone else and to the planet, but a lot of people don't have an opportunity to recognize how much responsibility they have. So I feel that the role of Karmapa has given me an opportunity to recognize the fact that I have a lot of responsibility to try to benefit others as well as the entire environment, the world and all of its inhabitants, as best I can. And being in this position has helped me to recognize that, and I would say that's a good thing.
That's a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
Yeah. So talk about responsibility, my friend. You're a young man. You're 29 years old. So what's the most important thing the Karmapa has to do for the next 29 years?
Wow. 29 years. Oh, I'm already 29 years. Google the 10 year, 5 year, 10 years today. 미세 가르쳐도 제시 자빈 미세르다 빌드업 좀 legally 제시 간다 지금 제아마도 배 대시 미세 기타 제시 앞서 디지털은 미세 게임도
Awesome. Whereas Google is a very organized company with great far-reaching and very specific plans for the future, and including the long-term future, like having a 25-year plan, a 10-year plan.
Our long term is 6 months.
Okay.
But yes.
More than that, maybe sometime.
I'm not like that. I don't build very specific plans for the long term. I feel like I'm building up to that in a gradual way. So for now, I don't have any specific plans
moment to moment
for that far out.
Yeah.
That's good. Yes, it's good because if you're moment to moment, you're always doing the right thing.
Yes.
Then
Try to. Yeah.
Yes, you're very humble. So I want to shift gear now to talk about practice, meditation and Buddhism. So the topic of our conversation is inner connection and meditation. And what practical advice do you have for secular Americans, people in this room and people watching this? By the way, 1 million people will be watching this. Yeah. So what advice do you have for the good people and on how they can develop their inner connection and their meditation?
Well, inner connection, meditation. 가르쳐다 디 아주다 뒤른 있어지 바디 하장기 때 가르쳐에 메티리얼에서 칭외배 야게 쇼침비에 대봐 가르인다 야게 쇼 가르쳐 교와 쇼침부터 대야 주지 민두산에 아니 아주기 셈데이냐 칭외배 야게 디즈 overwhelmed somewhere the dirbi샤가 당 아주드니 인두산에 가두이네 아주라 밸런스야디 나심기데 시디당 아니 칭외배 야게 데 컨디스 밸런스기여 봐 아주 칭외배기 차게 유여가 컨시질리아 and yanti overwhelmed so similar overwhelmed machaba that jalia and kanda ben meditation sadi kanda ngazu similar this chikatre this azu stable azu sim shididi stable cha jidang dana singi rawatoya 드리지 체도 아주 매주 시야디 개침부르지 참에 통되게
Lesson. So the 21st century is a time of great development, great improvement on many fronts, and also great change. Because of the very rapid developments that are happening, sometimes we feel overwhelmed by that. And the question becomes, how do we balance a sense of inner peace in our minds with this continuing external development and change? So meditation is something that can assist in that very much. It can help us to stabilize our minds, bring peace to our minds, and have more control over our minds so that we're not overwhelmed by this continuous change and development that's happening externally.
칭의비기 차게라 마되바 간다 셈기 가르레 하비니스 섬르 당아주 하비니스 망고지 칭의불 라르데버주마 차디야 딘데 마임바 칭의불라야 라마르베 낭셈다 시디스데난장도 야나 하비니스 세난장도 다나시 satisfaction 섬르 더 촉신의 컨디스제 용투야디 assemblia and dabaji meditation chiaga goba miyu du zoji mendo something years.
Many forms of our happiness these days actually depend upon outer things, external objects. But the nice thing about meditation, and what I think is one of the most important things that meditation does for us, is it helps us to connect with a happiness, a peace of mind, a sense of satisfaction that is not at all contingent upon external objects, but that comes from within ourselves.
Benachashavimna Ngasulia Yedeva Kashu the Beba Ngazu the Nyam the Namguni Yedeva Somerbe Berangazu Utan Azu Namgun meditation Manguchin Ulia Simziachi Lungla Simzini meditation charge that the Garjorasna. 우대 거두는 가수를 유해 되지. 가수다 소외전이야 우대 냠도 유해 되지. 드네 인두산에 디규제 때네 가수다 현지도 유해 되베기 간다라 resource natural resource som으로. 드리지리야 가수 셈 대체. 아니 가수 다디 가르레 초진의 셈디마 르르샤다 다는 쇼진이 아주 다도지 우다 예배서 말왜 근데 예배대 아주지 가르에 전신기 셈리아 지 원서게 예배지당 셈을 가와게 예배지 간당 아주리아 다다 소소리아 자침부지 예배지 recognize
Lasso.
did you say something
Lasso. For example, a lot of meditation techniques focus on immediate phenomena that are already present within ourselves. Of course, working with the breath is a very common technique in meditation, and the breath is something that is always with us for as long as we're alive. And so sometimes we don't recognize these precious natural resources that we have with us all the time. So from one perspective, meditation helps us pay attention and care to these natural resources that we have, which in turn helps us to relax. And from another perspective, it also helps us engender a natural sense of wonderment or awe or joyfulness about what is precious within us already.
Meditation sadi chojine di kachura tasma lulu de de samshimaiba meditation le dene ngasugi kachura awareness yada mindfulness yada dagana singi kachura 다 제수 이란 잡지 다 간다 거딩기 좋아 거딩제 된 좋아로 좋아지 배낭 아주 natural environment 이냐래 다나 신 소수기 가수다 수부 섬어베다나 소수 수부 이냐래 다 간다지 돌림비냐 다 제지와지 배지 인기를 섬정도
That's so. So meditation isn't just about relaxing and helping us to de-stress. It's something that can increase our awareness, can help us develop more mindfulness, but not only that, can help us develop a deeper sense of joy and appreciation. What do we appreciate? We not only appreciate the natural environment that is around us, but we, through meditation, heighten our appreciation of our own bodies and many other things.
So at what point does kindness and compassion develop? So we just look at the wonder of the inner phenomenon.
Yes.
And the outer. Does then kindness and compassion arise naturally, or does it need extra work?
Okay. Yes, 다 지당 가지기 샘디 가지고다 가지 아성을 다시 샘디 지점지기 랑 샘기 시디디 지점지기 채와 예비냐 안 되지기 가지고다지 아주 상물로 가지고 the basics 말해 선한다도 시제기 아주 여기다 정신서 미상마다 정신 집어 말해 다 델타 니르로레 인도게 예뱅에게 천하용대도 안 천하롭지
Lasso?
안드리 디 균세네 되네 아니 가지고 지당 아주다 주메기 서머바다지 주메 선한다도 야나 가다 다 주에만라다 주메기다 다 요아 망부시 온데게 와르데 유미나다 마주베 토하는 냠을 셔두상 아주 타 녀를 로여버지 근데 내가 돈에 온데게 와래 다나시 당기에 샤가 awareness 자리 아주 상물로 시제찬에 상물로 직대인데 버지 변당게디 롱데 지거래 아주 우를 셈지야데 게좀 자디요 가라서 우디 간데서 총벌해 우디다 지치 가르다지 green the planets down that then 총벌해서 와 근데 근데게 토하는 체인지산 아니 신이 아주 다 가르에 environment 뭐 신달이야 냐와 류데 냐와 라류비 임베증 아주 학고연 두산에 디 윤센데는 다 appreciation 산한다도 make connections 산한다 다 대용토야지 이 두산에 strong sense of awareness som다 상으로 interdependent 이 네버치 신동면에 som다
Lasso?
디 균이지 않은 compassion
Lasso?
더 용도 같아.
Well, firstly, I think that meditation is something that naturally connects us with who we are in an uncontrived way. So many things we do in our lives are contrived attempts at becoming something else. But meditation brings us back to the natural state of who we are and what we're made out of. And I think that can become a stepping stone for developing further qualities. For example, I mentioned awareness earlier. The awareness that we develop through meditation is an awareness that of the reality that we all depend upon each other. For example, when we become more aware of our breath in meditation, then we naturally become more aware of the fact that our breath isn't just this autonomously existent thing, it depends on other phenomena in order to arise. We might develop an appreciation, for example, that the air we breathe comes to us from the plants, and so forth. And so, in this way, meditation deepens our appreciation with the interdependent reality of things. We make a much stronger connection with that appreciation, and that becomes the springboard for compassion.
I like that. So I want to ask about mindfulness, your opinion on mindfulness in the West.
Okay.
As you know, mindfulness has become very popular in the West,
Yes.
especially in companies.
Yes.
Yeah, even here in Google,
Yeah.
we have a program called Search Inside Yourself, which is based on mindfulness. But beyond that, we're also doing things we're talking about,
Yes.
which is shamatha, calming
Yes.
the mind,
Yes.
vipassana,
Okay.
this is
Yes.
insight, and,
Yes.
and Brahma Vihara,
Yes.
kindness and compassion. So I want to know your opinion of the mindfulness movement in the West, and whether there's anything you think should be encouraged and anything we should be careful about.
Mindfulness. Can you talk a little bit of mindfulness? Everybody have mindfulness. Right?
Yes.
Jemba.
Oh,
Yes. In Pali, I think it's sati.
sati.
Yeah.
Okay. Chida mindfulness sadi and the popular summer with the G. Same. Cover cherry and design. So the Paji the share of Yaya Gisondos, mindfulness. Ta even Namjun Yamana traditional and Jigmindo Yana Ji Karsure, the Yondra, Namji Yondra, Rudi, that Chenshi Sadi. Azu Gisem and Kurapa Tangshana Summer Bataji. Azu Semlia, Taji, Susu Semlia, and a Kashuda, Cheshi Sen and Rando. Yana Azulia, me Yurusi so horrors. Me you must have been a Kurapa Tangshana, Rawan Tangsha, Mina, and Taji Taguanas, the bonus. Azu Sem the bonus, and did Tagumachi, Tangshana, and could normal wishing orders. You understand? As you say, take care, chair down. That plants, plants and Ayana, take care, chair. That the Kashwe catch me child orders. You use that tenses, Adi, and take care, chair. Karchadi, Nizu Karchado, and a Sosuki Hakwach. That is Adi, mindfulness, is a
So just to say a little bit about mindfulness itself, of course, mindfulness is very a well-known phenomenon these days, and I think most of us have a basic understanding of what it means. But you could say from a traditional perspective or from a commonly presented perspective of what's in the Buddhist teachings, we can say that an essential meaning of mindfulness is that it teaches us how to take care of our mind, or how to give our mind some guidance. So in the beginning, our mind has these traits which are quite similar to a small child. Small children need some guidance and some boundaries. If they don't have any guidance or boundaries, then they can get into trouble. So mindfulness is a method to take good care of our mind and give it some kind of guidelines, and in that way understand its true state more clearly.
So many questions for you, but I promised them I give them time to ask you questions.
Okay.
So I'm trying to cut down my own question.
Okay.
I'm interested to know about what you think about science.
Science.
Yeah. So we have a common friend, Richie
Yes.
Davidson.
Yes.
I know you're going to visit him.
Yes, yes.
He is a pioneer of the neuroscience of meditation.
Yes.
So I'm interested to know, are you excited or are you concerned that meditation is becoming a field of scientific inquiry?
Yeah. Chidang the Kashwada Tsiri Dana singing the Kashwaji religions and spiritual Koran Jordan, the Kagaraj. And the Hindustan, T. Junzen, then a Koran Jordan Ka Inza, Kunijiba Ingo Resade Koran Ingo Aske Omarada. The result is Jiba Ingo Aske. Cesa Tinsan Benaji Kashwe Taina Kandarian the Tsiri Toanaji Kashwe prove charge Kashwaji Bena Nambechu and Rabjimina, Tsiri Ton Nambechu, the Andaim prove jar. Today the Kachambo Iming Yahakumes. Even the zoo, the Karasana, neuroscience, Samarbataji, Lebet Siri, the zoo, Savar Chadi Ore, and Nambeg Chulu Nalolia, and Nambe Chulus on the massive, the Chulum, ancient Chulu, spiritual Mangoji Nalolia, 낭sem기 남샤 망부지 원디 가래 제자 안 가시 구지 다가 남샤 제버점이 냠뇽산에 엔다 간다 트리체샤 인두산데 덴덴기 다 간다 아주 good summer 냠시 지야기 가라 가주다 차이 resource 야वर 차대가 알아 sometimes 엔다나 정 아주 창맥이 제리 나래 가주다 spiritual 창맥이 라와드 가라서나 저물리야 미상으로리아 간다 펜토 야고 채도야지 당 good service summer 디토안에 에너지 better future 진지 와치 이미 뉴스나 가르인 비냥 아주 냠도 나디 마인드 가서데 마인드 라이프 근데 사카시 침브레 근데 인류스단에 디펜도 지전 펜도 용도면서 상황이 있어.
Of course, science and spirituality have different ways of proceeding to their respective goals. And we don't need to have the same way of proceeding, and we don't need to merge these two disciplines or fields such that they then share the exact same goals or have the exact same methodologies or produce the exact same results. However, I think that they can be beneficial to each other. Now, I'm not sure whether it's important or not in terms of the notion of science being able to prove the ideas of Buddhism, for example. I'm not really sure whether that's important or not, but what I would say is that not only Buddhism, but many ancient spiritual traditions have been spending all of this time throughout history focusing on the inner world of the mind. And I think that that can be a good resource for further research that can be used by science. In any case, both science and the great spiritual traditions share the same goal of performing a good service for the world and making a better future for everyone. So I think there's a lot of harmonious opportunities that can be explored there. And I myself have been to the Mind and Life conference a few times, and I see a lot of potential.
Yes.
So I'm going to shift gears now to changing the world.
Wow.
Oh, specifically how you are changing the world. You recently announced that you will establish full ordination for women in your lineage. To us, that's very exciting. Can you tell us more about that?
Tadi, kasure tadi, the small steps, some of the small step. Sidang azunan pegi, pegi go mana. Zambling gets nambe gego mamuchi nalolia. Energy. The Pomelia full ordination somewhere that the Ganger of Chedi are and Kasiana Gangedi the Caligalics Karsu Gangedi Chun Gangedi Se and Gor Zuyung are and Kasina Mutin Dana de are. Cezan Peg Nizuta Karsue Longo Yashama Virgin Lia and Ganda di Nizuti. This is hard, you are. And the understand that the Italia Carre consequence which are Danashi Peggy as a spiritual leader, which is the Italia should Kashodaji, Bezu, Shiranang to Tusnayar. And they understand that the understand Bena Takaras Lautadi. Tadi Kachim Richardi are some of those casual. 간다 부메기 지체리아 대바 슈니 부메 망부지 용디게 여비지당 고주기 최대의 저와티 강과야디 계심 더 스피릿 다가르 최기 고티 민지에 차네 디 계심을 차리가 something you understand 디톨리아 베즈르 치게베 나서 베즈 수수 니바카요 베즈샤로 두스레 다디 디기 가르쳐도 알아서는 안 부메기 가르에 지간다 남베지소 나로래 부메기 가르다 다 된도제 다 가르에 스페나 다 베너지 분명히 베나 지된 나오지 비미나 아니 분명히 베너지 프레지던트 제쇼레다 말에 다나 신기 가수의 분명히 에기 베너 지투 제쇼레다 말에서 저버저와 얘들 지구한 아주 안에 간다지 full ordination study 다 얘들 지구를 간다 high state somewhere 보셔도 자딩이 위해서 다디 개침으로 자딩이 이제 삼정이에요.
Lasso. Well, right now I feel like I'm taking small steps or beginning to take small steps. In Tibet, as well as many other Buddhist countries throughout history, women have faced difficulty in achieving the status of full monastic ordination. There are some areas where people have been striving to make improvements and change this, and in some other areas, the status quo is being allowed to remain up until now. But from the Tibetan perspective, it's been hundreds of years since women have been able to achieve or receive full ordination. And I think that this is a very important situation to remedy. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as well as many other Tibetan Buddhist leaders, have been putting efforts into this. And therefore, I think it's very important because, of course, there are many, many women practitioners of Buddhism who have great faith in the Dharma and should be properly seated as leaders in their communities. And the status of full ordination is a very important position of leadership. And so I think it's worthy of effort from that perspective. And therefore, I'm going to put as much effort in accordance with whatever abilities I have to help make this change, to help bring this change about. In general, these days, we're observing a lot of rapidly changing dynamics regarding women and leadership. We've observed various countries having female heads of state, female leaders of government, presidents, prime ministers, and so forth, and ongoing discussions in certain countries about whether that would be permissible, and certain other countries about whether that would be possible and when it would happen, and so forth. And I really see the status of full ordination as a similar level of leadership for women to hold, and that's why I think it's important for society.
You're very humble. You do a lot. Oh, thank you. You're very humble. That's big, but to you it was small.
Okay.
You know what would be really cool for the 18 Karmapa to be a woman.
Oh.
You saw this here first.
Yeah. 되게 가능성이다. 900 years history 여기서 땡에 랑상 다 줘야 될까 하고도
Lasso.
다디 meditation 규린지처럼 다 지하는 만도 디디 랑상 걸어 가고.
Lasso. Well, since there's 900 years of history behind me, I don't know if I can make an immediate change of course. I think I might have to meditate for a longer time in order to be able to do
지단 디 강에서 개요 말성도 디
라서.
강에 디 영처로 디 가수들 남변 조단 토네 삼단단 토네 디 만지 개요 말도 쉐쇼 토네
Lasso?
다디 society 토네 다디 강에로 체면을 선버지
Lasso?
네 디디지
So I think from a Buddhist perspective, if we look at the teachings of Buddhism, there's no problem at all in that, in having the subsequent Karmapa being a female. But from a societal perspective, I sometimes wonder what kind of difficulties there would be.
Yeah, that's very thoughtful. Let's see, 2 more questions before we open up. So there are 3 things I admire about you. I mean, more than 3, but there are 3 big ones. I admire your progressiveness, your open mind. Yes. I admire your work towards women's rights. And the third thing I admire about you is environmentalism. Yes. You are known to be a very avid environmentalist. So the question here is, my friend, Your Holiness.
Yes, no problem.
What is your vision for the environment?
Sometimes I call myself your loneliness.
Yes. And in front of camera, I must call you Your Holiness.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
That's okay. 지단의 environmental이야 지가수의 이슈디 the global issues 말하면 저번에 인류의 차디아래 근데 인도스탄에 디 토네 셰비는 게 내가 게도 제대로 내가 춘춘 줄지 시리 매대버지다 기타 시리 시라 매된 게 그렇지 다 이번에도 조디 아니 히말라야 리전에 다나신 벽이 가수다 사토디 개침시라인데 버지 environmental 토네 개침시라인데 표현을 지미나 안에 아주 에시아기다 춘제 사로지다 안다네 third pole 사로다 망보지 간다 디 environmental 토한 다티상 지 슈침버지 망보지 계지 망보지 연로디 아래 안데 인두스탄의 벽이 society 좀 나로래 아니지 잡아다 주면데 줄이야 된대지 가수래 미망근 고치 지야다 뉴버스난다도 된대기 슈겐 첩시라요 인두스탄 당부 차준 디즈기 안 거주지 environmental 토리아 지 거주기 당부 하과지 디게 전부 임바다 딘로당으로 디디 하과 임이나 된대 팽그리 섬제네 아주 곰바디즈는 고주지 내가 체하로 충분해 인두스탄다 갈라간 점르지 삼번은 신지 용도가 아마도 임네 갈라간 점르지 용디 아레스 안데 인두스탄 디균전 때네 간다 environment issues 아디 간다지 도난 아주기 니마스 지기 초와단 잡아야 되지 니마르리 초답된 교화마다 의미나 안다가스 니마 가시지 environment 토리아 내가 가시지 되는데 평가와 말해 드니르산의 livelihood somewhere
맞아.
living style 데 change 겨데 디 change 잡을이야 당보 아주 균로 somewhere 균로 삼아지고 하디 개점이 민주산에 디 토리아 베즈르도 시가레스 샤이
맞아. 다 nangamasong ide sapanang신 영특 말이 사panang신.
삼바나시
삼바나. Oh, that's all.
Oh, sorry.
No. I'm sorry.
Yes, your sorriness.
Sorriness.
So the environmental issue is, of course, a global issue. It's a huge issue for everyone on the planet and for the planet itself. And therefore, I see my activities in relation to this as very small, humble activities. But nevertheless, Tibet is a little bit of a special place in terms of the environment. Particularly for Asia, it's known as a treasury of rivers because it's the source of so many Asian rivers. And it's known also as the third pole because of the important role that its glaciers and so on play. So since Tibet is this very important place for the environment, I think it's good if monks and nuns can begin some of the transformations that need to occur in terms of our living style. And monks and nuns have a special opportunity and ability to lead the people and lead the way in this regard. So therefore, I'm doing the best I can to help change some of our practices at our monasteries and make the monks and nuns more aware of what needs to change with regard to the environment, with the wish that that will slowly begin to extend outward. So things haven't gone along perfectly as in the exact manner that I would have hoped, but we're making our best efforts and progressing along slowly in this. Basically, with the environment, the important point for us to understand is that not changing anything about our lifestyle, yet doing a few things here and there for the environment is not really going to help. That's not going to be sufficient. What's required is the change in the way that we live, a change in our style of living. And in order to do that, we have to work on transforming our motivation.
I have one more question for His Holiness before I open up to the floor. So if you want to, you can start lining up now at the mic. So last question for Your Holiness. What can we, Google, and the Silicon Valley do to help you?
Wow. 나들이 구글이야 연무팅 나버리세. 야심 시라지. 내가 overwhelmed 차차로다.
Lasso?
나들이 가르쳐다지. 나란지 남다 산이 버루들이야 예대버르시다 가르쳐도 그래. 시에토야 갈라카보도와
Lasso?
딱 안도 투시스 아니 가슈레지 구글디 엔다 간다 좀링 나로리아 딱 간다 딱 컴퍼니 스머르다 지지 슈게 샴푸시다 요데 비스레 데 인두산 간즈 가슈레 저미 데이터다 다나 신기 고요라서 디지털이야 내가 방법 채버들이야 예 간술이야 아주 당 제수랑 쇼요
Lasso.
언제래 라버치 나 미세 샤스케
Lasso. This is my first time visiting Google today, so I'm already overwhelmed by its vastness. And basically, I just want to say thank you to Google for having me as a guest here. Google, of course, is a very influential company, and it's doing very positive, influential things in terms of its practices in relation to society and in relation to human well-being. And therefore, I'd like to offer these words and sentiments of praise toward Google for that and thank them for that. But other than that, I don't have any special requests to make.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything I can do for you, you tell me off stage.
Okay, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we have some Dory questions, and so let's alternate live question then Dory questions. Okay, yes, my friend, JD.
Your Holiness, thank you for your presence.
Thank you.
On the topic of meditation, I have a couple questions. I'm a student of the 6 yogas of Naropa and been learning about the practice of Tummo meditation.
Okay.
And so I wondered if you could talk about the benefits of Tummo meditation and perhaps any advice for a Westerner wishing to practice Tummo, inner fire.
Wow.
It's a hot question.
Hard question. Tummo golya jidang dinge mise di tholya tada Kajure di nyamlen ke she amaras. Hindustan di gol she thoda kana khawsta dos.
Lasso?
Anda Hindustan da yimbine kandar Kajuta di ji tangi di shubene shere ji ajuda ji bene ji shine samarwe da ji sim shiwan ne abdi yebeche an di tholya an da kandar ji yang 지당기 롱了电的 sim zimba tang sim zimba sim tempo ne ya da yang de dana sim le den ne an ji sim tempo ne ya ru de ne tabshin pang sta yu sres
Lasso?
and sim den sim tempo ne ya di des karre safe samarwe yibi ne ya tuzu mam gwa ji da di passion samara sogom chambo yu ko dang da dinji gwa ji da 롱了电的cha di Jokbur Jebche immediately Yangati Zedevich.
Lasso?
That Indusan Tangiti Tumusa this way, Kandar Tras Chikarwe in a hot Chibo Maimba, that is similar Semgi she did the Dinda Jawe of Twane, Kandar Kashurataji, similar Penta Tolia, Roto Chumina, then the Pento Champion or some repetition.
Lasso? Firstly, I haven't done any practice of Tummo for myself, so I can't explain in great detail about that practice. But what I would say in general is that there's different ways in Buddhism we approach taming our mind or calming our mind. One is in reliance on the prana, or the inner winds, and then one is by working with the mind itself. So working with the mind itself to tame our mind is the safe way to relate to our mind in the context of meditation. It takes a little bit more time. You need a little bit more patience in order to transform your mind that way. But if you stick with it, you can do it, and there's less danger. The 6 dharmas of Naropa, and in particular the practice of Tummo, falls into the category of relying on the pranas, or inner winds, in order to transform the mind. And that's a more dangerous approach. You get to the desired result, it is said, in a faster way, but because you're going faster, it's also more dangerous at the same time. So greater caution needs to be applied when taking that approach, but if you have that proper caution, and if you regard that practice not just as being about inner heat or something like this, but as a method for further enhancing and establishing peace of mind and peace in our mind, then such practices can definitely be beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a question that was sent through the net, through our internal internet. When this is asked by Vaipap, when we or our loved ones face suffering from incurable diseases, disability, or death, how can we best ease the suffering and help with healing?
觉得没问题。
Juda bimeginaza yangmina chiwa.
가르쳐도 더 치워서 말하다지 변하지 수수 이도미오 니즈르비 토제 다디지 accept 잘 들려 되네가 소다 강에를 지원디 알아 아니 변한 미세 치와로 지민디 아주 강에 온디 알아 아데 인두스탄에 아주 컨디체제 naturally 간다 깨는 치거버디 한국어 정신이 지미 이미네야 땅 아주 디 딘데게 따가지고 natural systems of circle 아주 샘디기 the desire somewhere 데바디 디난 드라이브 심비냐 아주 the body 디 디나 마르런 그렇지 또 심비 인지잖아 다디 컨디스 accept 차디 다디 미는 아주 텐덴시 day to day 가수의 training somewhere training 과디 개점 메로 something dos and 인지스탄에 아니 니마타와르 신지 가수의 수수 미지 니마지데다 미지기 바라보죠 텐데지기 가르레 imagination 체제 근데 이제 돈에 and training 체제 and 컨디션 글리글에 아주 샘디 and used to it 서마로다지 근데 체비미나 곰디 태비미나 근데 지 가르레 지 치와서 아디야 아주기 music the process 서마로 근데 지마다베 치와서 아디야 아주리아 지 가르레 I'm familiar 서마로 근데 뭐인바 That's
so imagination sena ngarang chigire sewa
Marabadi Yimbala Samdr Tamri.
lasso
Tadi Chashan.
lasso. So yes, we do have difficulty accepting very difficult situations that befall us, including death. Generally speaking, of course, death is a part of the natural cycle of things, even though we don't want to experience it. But by virtue of being born into this body, that means this body is going to die. So therefore, I think some type of training in the recognition of the inevitability of death is very important and can be very beneficial. Some type of training and employment of our imagination to get used to this idea of death and to regard our own human life as simply a process that includes death. And that way, we can come to see, if we become familiar with thinking in this way, we can come to see death not as an insult or an instance of becoming conquered, but as a natural part of the process that is our life. Lasso. And to help us do this, we can use our imagination to regard one day as being like a whole lifetime.
Yes.
Your Holiness, thank you for your time today. In your opinion, what's the greatest threat to our planet and our human existence?
Threat. Wow. Threat assess. Okay. Tadi nyanga Tajidan Yangar Damned Yonsibra. Taimine Yangashu the natural disasters and that Mongus on the art that this will have the Persian Azu Yanam China the Kazazu draw Miki. The Carver Yangati Sususwa Chicken Yanga Sonashuchim beyond the year. 다 가르스는 아주 깊은 등산 뒤줄이야 아주 깊은 아주 드럼이 차질 때에 점불리야 균도 컨디션이야 봐 슈겐 가지 태여 때 아주 삼을 직당 비미는 거는 할래거 버치 디 투수 튠튠지 나라라 교와시 친여디 아주 디 세브스타레 내셔지 임빈다 망부지 투수 망부지 로사 망비 dik 사조로 다들 인도스탄에 디 균세대네 나주기 베나 휴먼 더 가서 드라미기 령암다 디수 춘지 제마도나 된데 타마 정이 단냥 년계기 교차지 모습을 말해서 말하듯
Lasso. Well, there are many dangers to the world and to beings on the planet that we could think of and identify. Of course, sometimes there's terrible natural disasters that occur and so forth. But I think even more severe than all of that is the harms that are inflicted on the planet through the selfishness of human beings. If we look at how many changes the planet has undergone since the time humans have been inhabiting it, it's a relatively short time span, but we can see that there's been great changes that have been brought to the planet and have been caused to the planet by the conduct of humans. If this was just a natural cycle of change, I think things would be changing at a much different rate. So, therefore, I think, generally speaking, that if we don't find a way to transform our desires as human beings or put a limit on our desires, then that spells great danger for the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is another Dory question. This one comes from Doug. Buddhism has been a presence in America for 150 years, and in the past decades become widespread. So given that, might we expect a homegrown super meditator, some sort of American Milarepa?
America, all busy. 용 시브드 용 미스 게임다 이미네 녜디 전화를 가용 됐잖아 가르에 디 상으로지 가르에 material focus 쇼처에 되지 진짜기 제가 미신다지 사바지 용예이네 될 남산디 거를 전화를 주용돼야지 드린두산에 디 균선 때네 땡땡지 가르에 great meditator 영아디 지 개견치 보면서 뭐가나한테 전화없이
Lasso?
다디 영아 디스 가르 미디미겐 디스 쇼체면서
Lasso? Lasso?
다이미네 참서 미디미겐 쇼 같이 체여는 디스지기 아니 간다르 가르에 야 가르에 뉴베체 영아 가르에 영미스 말아봤던 이두산 디균세 때네 마시네야 가시 야우예 위네야 아니 게라 첨부 매매 제가 야부에서 상황을 게라 첨부 인뱅에 봤게면 와
Lasso?
아니 게라 첨부 인바 상황야 야부 인뱅에 봤게
Lasso?
레인두스탄에 따티 수수기 spiritual master 디사데 페지 가르 personal 데토네 수수기 하고 가지 퍼지든지 인사를 섬트는 도스
Lasso?
오늘 전에다 대 가르에 슈퍼레티즈 바지 아주 지라 통도야 가라 버리시면
Lasso? Well, I think such a thing is definitely possible. There's nothing impossible about it. On the other hand, my general feeling is that there are more obstacles than there are favorable conditions for such a thing to arise at this point, because there's a lot of materialistic focus in general in our society and so forth. So there are some obstacles. At the same time, what can happen is that sometimes, no matter how strong the obstacles are, then the individual's ability grows that much more to counter those obstacles. So nothing is impossible in that regard. But another thing to note is that we may have great spiritual practitioners among us, but maybe they're not very well known or don't have a lot of fame. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge that Just because individuals are famous, that doesn't mean they're necessarily great in terms of their spiritual qualities. So I think that the identification of a great spiritual master needs to happen on a very personal level, and we might not be able to spot them in the same way we would spot a superhero.
Any of you in the audience who turns out to be a great meditator or superhero, please come talk to us after the talk so we can identify you.
Your Holiness, it's been a great pleasure for me to meet you in person. I watched your the documentary about your previous incarnation and how they find your present incarnation, and I find it very fascinating.
Yes.
My question today is that personally, I feel that there is a great loss of ancient wisdoms despite of the human advancement in recent years. It's become much harder for people to pursue spiritually and have control over their lives, to go into the mountain to meditate 10, 20 or more years to reach spiritual enlightenment. So I was wondering, what's your advice for people who find it hard to control their lives, and do you personally find it harder to pursue spiritually because of the tremendous amount of responsibilities and burdens that you have?
나랑 게도 spiritual 제 가라하고도 가라하고디 가라서는 게디 environment 오늘 제비는데 최기 environment 최 leadership이라 다 이미 environment 디나는데 politics 단지 dirty politics 단다나지 진담 상물을 involve 제자 다디 하고 싶지 가르쳐다 다 spiritual 제사디 수수연의 라삼남다로 지미나 this spiritual chasadi environment ti kala khawsta to
Lasam.
andre Hindustan ti kyunsen tene manipulate samar manipulate chadi ta kandar sangor benaji shinda bhasha na aju tv stebi na manipulate abuji oni gorwa andana jing andre Hindustan ti kyunsen tene kashwe nge namju ka changyusan spiritually tada tempo chame bi insare
Lasam.
tempo chame bi inzang environmental kyabashta yebro tongdos
Lasam.
environment
Lao.
di kuryu dene an kuryu khashelia ranjingi spiritual ka chana shu che khashe shu shu ju yende
Lasam.
machine ji ka jure material tang dega tone develop sta me deba ya dinde saja dindelia a spiritual higher on ya
Lasam.
ya di material is pusum soba ye deba khashel le ya lo chan
Lasam.
a de yong de dos de Hindustan ta di tempo mebe ngarang gi gyen de simba
Lasam.
ta kan dar yang khashwe 간다 다 강해를 심자. 어디로 세.
Oh, Lasam.
오케이.
Tene tirtangi di nishita tura nishita jipe mila tene kaledi jomyaki.
달래는 저야 없이. 다 간다 create similar 수수익이 가져다 environment create 자디 계속시다 매너 섬다.
Lasam.
수수익 environment 낭sem다 사나 다가나시 이제 create 차. 배낭 아주 웬바사들이야. 웬바사 당 아주 웬바사 시어로 봐. 웬바디 배낭 캄바 춘춘지 나라래 민이 예비냐. 남중 아주 직시도스다나 아니 직가로 디버롤이야 this private space. 수혜체. 이제 그 돈의 소셜 space 요하고. 근데 소하기 시야요.
Lasam.
되는 시 스페이스 소소 소과디 계시면 싶다.
Lasam. Lasam. Well, to answer your later question first, I do find it difficult myself to practice spirituality in this modern age. From one perspective, you could say that I live in a spiritual environment because I'm a leader of a spiritual tradition, and so I have certain elements of spirituality in my physical environment. But from another perspective, because I'm a spiritual leader, these days you have to deal with all kinds of politics and comings and goings and relations that are sometimes unsavory and so forth. So what that leads me to realize is that there's a great deal that's contingent upon our own motivation. If we don't have a strong positive motivation from our own side, then it's very difficult to practice spirituality because the environment has such a strong manipulative effect on our mind. So sometimes when people are in a very peaceful environment where there's not a lot of distraction or maybe not a lot of outer development in that particular area, they can practice spirituality well. But if they go to a place where everything is abundant and there are more distractions, then their spiritual practice starts to fade away. And I think that this is my own shortcoming as well, that perhaps I have just as much as anyone else. And therefore, I think it's very important for us to create a supportive environment for ourselves that matches our intention to practice spirituality. In the traditional Buddhist text, they talk about going to an isolated place to meditate, for example. In a modern context, when you're sharing an apartment or a house with another person, even if there's only 2 people inside the residence, you talk about how you're going to split up the space so you can have your own private area. So in the same way, I think it's very important for us to create physical space for ourselves so that we can do things such as meditate.
Thank you very much.
This next question is actually relevant to what you just said.
Okay.
Which is, what are the most effective meditation techniques that you have used?
Oh, wow. I said techniques ke mindus. The permanent technique ke mindu.
I don't have any special techniques that I rely on in a continuous way all the time. Meditation techniques are something that just kind of come and go for me.
That's why.
So what's the current technique that you have?
Current very smart.
Dealing with difficult people?
Current technique. Wow. Forgot
again.
Yeah. I don't have any special technique. Maybe just like that has way condition be da labardo emotional emotional di just manam che tarang ya karji relax che dia ji karji tarang o kyang che relax regimental something.
Okay. So if you could call it a technique, I find that the main thing I do is when I notice that I'm feeling strong emotions, that I try to not follow after the emotionality of it, but instead sustain a feeling of relaxation within that.
Yes, that's good. That's shamatha. Okay, you have the last live question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for visiting us, and hope you come back again. My question is, Silicon Valley is known for its innovation. We consider that innovation has a lot of similarities to meditation, deep focus, searching for answers. But at the same time, it also has a lot of material focus. Do you think there's a trade-off between innovation in the Western sense versus doing good for humanity through meditation?
Nuchola innovation seguro wala.
Innovation
sarpa idea sarpa da ngebo sarpa pentoya ge ngebo sarpa. Tene di sama shukchambu yore. Tene the spiritual church chone tene pensem. Yore dini tuya yore be galware kandes
pensem
re church chone church plaksam. Di dang innovation ni di
Then Tadi Kashre Chidangi innovation Manguchi Kashre Susu Semdi Nedu Nebe Gupsum Sem Majebe Gupsum she was just Majebe Golia Manguchi 10 years innovation Manguchi on there.
Lassa
Gemma disturbed in Chasana, you are married.
Lassa
And the Hindustan Dana Singi and Champagne Sambasade Kandara Niji Tone Kashreji Sem Nedu Nebeki. That Niji Tone, that Kashre, that Korani Binja, the another relative ndabchi
Lasso.
dus chadi user something dus
Lasso.
the Hindustan da zo di kashwe khandara kashwe 아주에다 망부치 수수 펜심 다 가르쳐데 펜심 당기 공도 쉬는 시에 아주 상월지 지질량 저바 차리게 인두산에 디균전 되네 네 정신기 다 펜심 사람 다 펜심 쓰는 라도 야나 다 가르쳐 민신다 다위나 네 간다 가르쳐 responsibilities somewhere
Lasso.
that damn tradition.
Lasso. There definitely can be a lot of overlap between innovation and what you might call a wholesome intention or pure intention of the path of spirituality. In fact, if we look at innovation, I think we can see that most of the great, brilliant ideas from the innovators of society occur to them when their minds are relaxed and open. And in the same way, the best of our wholesome intentions and altruistic states of our heart occur when our minds are open and spacious. So I think these two, innovation and pure intention, are close cousins or relatives with each other. When we appreciate our interconnectedness, we can further develop a natural altruism, which can be known by another name that we might call responsibility.
Your Holiness, any last words for the audience? Any in closing? No closing. Thank you so much for your attention, kindness, and participation.